Welcome to the Brotherhood Remnant, hosted by Tim Yarborough and me, Rob Carr. This episode, we will be interviewing William Bill Bangham, who has been an educator as well as a prominent force in the area of lay renewal and small groups. Bill will be discussing his role in this area of renewal and small groups. We hope you will enjoy it. And please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and feel free to check us out on Brotherhood Remnant Archives, where you can see many of the articles that we are discussing, and we hope that you enjoy this podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the Brotherhood Remnant Podcast. I'm Tim Yarborough, and with me is Rob Carr, my co-host, who we affectionately call our resident Brotherhood expert. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Tim. It's good to see you again.
We have a very special guest with us tonight. Really excited to introduce, and I'll just bring him on right now. And with us is Bill Bangham. And Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, Rob.
Bill, you and I crossed paths at the Brotherhood Commission. You left and I came.
That's
you remember
right.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I filled the position of Baptist Young Men's editor when Bill left. And we both have the distinction of working directly with Eddie Pettit.
That could take a lot of unpacking.
I know. And if you know Eddie Pettit, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know him, maybe that's a podcast for the future, Rob. Bill.
Very good. Very good.
Great man of God. Eddie is one of a kind. He's still around. Well, Bill, we're real informal with this podcast. If you've watched any of them, you know that. So I'm going to allow Rob to drive this thing because he's been talking with you. As we begin, maybe you could share just a little bit about your background in Brotherhood, okay? And then Rob is going to get into some of the finite details of that, I think, in here in a minute.
I came into Brotherhood in kind of a roundabout fashion, and it was through a small group in a church in Annapolis, Maryland, which had nothing to do at all with Brotherhood. And I had, I'd kind of given up on the institutional church when I got to college, and this was the '60s and Vietnam War on poverty. Hunger in America, all these issues. And I remember my particular church was arguing over what to do with the used communion bread. And I'm going, there's more things important to argue about than that. And I kind of really stepped away from it. And I even had a African-American fraternity brother that would often say to me, your problem's not with Mr. Jesus, your problem's with the organized church. And he was right. Well, wow. When my wife and I, before we got married, she extracted a promise from me that by the time we had children, we'd be attending a church together. And I went, okay, I can do that for her, and I got some strong values out of my time in the church as I was growing up. Yeah, I want to expose my children to that also. So yeah, I can do that. So anyway, so we happened to join this Baptist church in Annapolis, and we started attending the young adult Sunday school class, and there was a teacher by the name of Wanda Barker, and Wanda invited us over for dinner one night, and we had dinner, and all of a sudden, all these other people started showing up. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was a bit angry, and I was looking, what's going on? I felt like it'd been bait and switch, so to speak, and I'd been set up, and so here came these people in, and they were members of a small group, and they began talking about what they were doing in terms of ministry, and every one of them was involved in ministry of some sort. Mission outreach, I won't go into all of them, but there was one guy that owned a boutique press, and he was bringing people out of the state mental hospital and giving them a place in which they could not only learn a profession but be supported. I won't go. Some of them worked with folks up at the state mental hospital, and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to these people, these men and women, and I'm going, they got something going here. And then I kind of got to the point where I said, I'm going to be part of this. And so kind of fast forward a bit, we've been involved in small groups. Our church was big into small groups. I don't know. I think at one time we had 400 people meeting in small groups outside the church. And there was a lot of retreats. We did a lot of retreats. That was fun. But I got interested in the dynamics of these groups and talking with the pastor. Matter of fact, the pastor is he's deceased now, but he's another Brotherhood alumni, David Haney. Excuse me, David Haney. And I was at that time I was a biologist. I was working in salt marshes on the Chesapeake Bay and very interested in animal behavior. In these small groups, I saw these critters running around behaving in interesting ways, and that piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, somewhere or another, I became kind of the group dynamics expert in the church, and we had retreats, and we started, we realized that, some groups had a very positive experience, and others, it was just awful. And we began to look why, and we began to realize if they went into these groups with some small understanding of what group life was like, they would have a better chance of succeeding, so to speak, I guess, having a better experience. And so I began leading these weekend, one-day, half-day seminars on group dynamics. And we asked everyone who was going to be involved in a small group to attend. They weren't required, but most of them came. And we did see, a real positive value out of that. And so, I don't know, I was kind of going along on that route. And my introduction to Brotherhood, candidly, our church didn't have a brother. Well, they did, but they were a bunch of geezers, and I wasn't a geezer. I was a 20-something, and so I didn't, I didn't think it had much value for me at the time. So anyway, my introduction to Brotherhood came through Wanda Barker, this Sunday school teacher, and I was kind of mouthy in Sunday school class, and Wanda didn't seem to mind, and she would often tell me, "We've got to find more ways for you to tell your stories." And I didn't think much about that at the time, but she subscribed to 3 magazines for me. One of them was the Commission magazine from the International Mission Board. The other was, another one was Missions USA from the Home Board. And the third one was World Mission Journal. And I would get those and I'd look through them. And I mean, they were story driven and, crisp writing, incredible photography, and not just the individuals that they were telling the stories about, but I really got interested in the individuals behind those stories. And I don't know, this all kind of came together. At one point in time, I got invited to write a book on group dynamics, which was published by the Brotherhood Commission. And I kind of think that's the reason why at one time in the future they looked at me for being an editor. Because I'd left the university. I'd decided I was not going to pursue biology anymore. And I was going to try to I had 3 books under my belt that I published. And I thought, I'm going to see if I can make it as a writer. And quickly learned that authors' paydays are six months apart when the royalties checks come in. And so I started doing some freelancing. And it was local publications and regional stuff. It wasn't anything big, But I mean, it was incredible. I went, my goodness, these people actually pay me to travel somewhere and interview these incredible people and spend time with them, come back and write a story about. They pay me to do this, And anyway, so I don't know. I was cobbling together. My writing wasn't supporting us as a family. Diane was a nurse, fortunately, and I was doing a number of different things. I sold print. I worked in an ice cream store. What else did I do? Kind of weird. Tree surgeon.
Okay.
Yeah. And but all the time, and as a carpenter, probably the most significant one was a carpenter for another fellow in our church who would give me time off to go to a story. And I knew that cost him, but he did it anyway because he believed in what I was trying to do. And one day, when I was selling print and not carpentering, World Mission Journal arrived in the mail, and I opened it up, and I looked through it, and I saw there was an article that the two editors were leaving, and one of them was Jim Newton, and the other one was David Wilkerson. And I know these are names that are familiar to you, but I looked at it and I thought, man, I'd love to do one of those jobs. And then reality set in. You don't know how to put out a magazine. You don't have a clue how to put out a magazine. And the phone rang, and it was David Haney from the Brotherhood Commission, and he said, "I want you to come down for one of these editor positions."
Wow.
And I went, man, I got to pray about this. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Well, pray hard and fast, because this is a publication. Be back tomorrow and tell me your decision. And if you don't say yes, I'm going to go somewhere else." So I called Diane, and she said, "Ooh, we got to pray about this." And I said, "Well, we don't have much time." And we hung up the phone it wasn't but a few minutes later, she called back and she said, "Call them up. Tell them we're coming. This is right." Maybe it was a Wednesday. We were on a plane to Memphis. By Thursday, we had found a place to live. And 2 weeks later, we had moved halfway across the continent. And I was meeting my first deadline,
Bill, what year was that? Do you remember what year
that was? 1981, January of 1981. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other editor which was Mike Livingston. Mike wasn't there yet. So, I mean, here I was, green as a quilt. You got a magazine to put out, and these are deadlines. And I'm laughing. Yeah. No, we're serious, But that was my introduction into Brotherhood. And I've often wondered why they thought about me. And I think the reason was the small groups book was really selling very well. That was, it was making a lot of money for them. And I'd sold the rights to it for $300, but I just wanted to see it get out. I mean, I didn't have any expectations of it making a lot of money. And people have said to me, "Aren't you sorry that you didn't get the royalties?" I said, "Heck no, I got a job." A job that set me up for the rest of my career.
And as you were talking, I was sliding this now. Now Tim's going to do a better job, but I was sliding your book up. And by the way, I may have to send this to you and let you autograph it, sir.
Turn around. Let's look at the young man on the back there.
Well, there's actually, it's just a description. Because Bill Bangham is one of the emerging young leaders in renewal amongst Baptists, a deacon and a church leader in the Heritage Baptist Church, Annapolis. He is the director of the biological laboratories at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, this is the book that kind of got you going, I guess, Bill, got you started. And by the way, this book will be, Bill, you may not know this, but very quickly, we make these in our Brotherhood archives. We make books like this available. And I plan to literally copy the pages so people can read this. This is a excellent book on small groups. So I commend you for your work on this particular book and of course the other things you did. And I also have something here which might tweak your memory because it came around the same time you were there in 1981. And you'll have to forgive me, but I'm trying to line this up to where it'll come up in the but it was founded in 1981 and it's called Journey into Lifestyle Evangelism and Ministry. Did you have anything to do with this, Bill? Or was this already there when you got there?
I think it was there after me. Honestly, Rob, I don't remember if I did anything with it or not.
Well, it was published in 81, so I was wondering if maybe it was there when you arrived.
It may have been. It's probably something Heaney did, you know.
Okay, yeah. And but I guess what I'm thinking about, and Tim, this is where I was heading, because 50 years ago last month, I started at Southern Seminary, and right after I got there, we had an on missions day where Southern had Glendon McCulloch from Brotherhood and Elma Hunt from WMU. One of the things Glendon emphasized in his tenure was the beginnings, and again, this would have been in the 70s, early 70s, but obviously the small groups and the whole journey issue, I think, was birthed through Glendon, and that he really wanted to see lay people engaged more than just being deacons. And this is what Tim and I have talked about. How do you expand the role of the laity beyond the conventional levels of Sunday school teacher, RA leader, and maybe Brotherhood director, deacon, and that kind of thing. So I think if I can get you to share a little bit, how did you see the Brotherhood Commission, and how did you see yourself trying to expand the role of the laity in the churches to say, hey, there's a lot more to do here than just the things we mentioned.
My experience at Heritage certainly informed that, and David, that was a matter of fact. I know Glendon McCulloch sought out and brought David to the Brotherhood Commission because of this understanding of the idea of the laity. Matter of fact, one of David's books was called The Idea of the Laity. Another one was Renew My Church. And but anyway, and he was talking about, the fact that all are called, all are gifted, all are sent. Not just pastors, associate pastors, ministers of music, missionaries, but every one of us. And I really bought into that because I saw, when people grasped that understanding and began to look at who they were and what comprised them and what they had passion about, what they were called to. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, it was just...
When I heard in 1976, there was the Southern Baptist Convention, and I happen to have the 16 millimeter movie of it in this vast archive here. Mm-hmm. And again, one of the things that I heard Glendon say over and over is what you just said about all are called, all are gifted, all are sent. And he was saying, in essence, a new paradigm is that we've got to literally find a place for every, and we're focusing on laymen, obviously, but it was laity in general. Yeah. But the layman needed a place to exist and to serve and to be, not just in the church, but outside the church. And I really think, as I look at the history of Brotherhood, that was a huge paradigm shift, I think, in the life of the work with men to do that and to call on it. And maybe if you can be helpful here too, Bill, was there a risk in this? Did you find not everybody was on board with this idea?
Oh no, they weren't. And I don't know how this came about, but my part of it, I don't know. This may have been Haney again. But there's a guy by the name of Ralph Neighbor,
Yes.
and Ralph was a good friend of David's and would often come to our church. And quick aside here to give you an idea of what he would do. He would come into the church and he'd say to the folks, say to the deacons, "Okay, tonight we're going to go out and we're going to visit the bars. And we're going to get to know people." And so I remember the night, that he divided us up, and I happened to be in the group that went with him, and I don't think the other one had anybody that was leading. I think David was supposed to, and for some reason he couldn't. An emergency came up, and we went out and we had a great time. And the Hebrew people, they didn't know where our church was. They didn't know what we were about. And really, you Baptists are here in the middle of a bar with us. It was an incredible experience, and we were so excited about it. And we went back to the church, and we all got back together again. We're sharing what we had done and what we experienced, and the things we had heard and the things we'd learned. And here was the other group sitting there silent. They hadn't gone anywhere. They sat in the church parking lot the entire time we were out there. Yeah.
Wow.
So I really bought into this, and you're right. I mean, it was not universally accepted. I always laugh when I see that emerging young leader. I get amused at that because the books were initially, and here's where the Brotherhood Commission came in, or connection. The books originally were supposed to be published by Broadman. They agreed to it. We signed a contract, and then it's like they disappeared into a black hole, and we couldn't find out what's going on. And so David went up to see, and called us up, and he says, "I'm going to go up and see what's going on." I think no, he hadn't gotten to the Brotherhood Commission yet.
Okay.
But anyway, so he goes up to the Sunday school board, and he said, "My 100 and some odd page manuscript had been reduced to 26 pages, and that they were really concerned about the dangerous things that I talked about in it." And I remember, matter of fact, hearing from somebody else that someone told them that Bangham, Haney, and Neighbor were dangerous men that bore watching. And that was kind of the attitude at that time. A lot of people hadn't bought into it. Laymen are supposed to come. They're supposed to sit in the pew. They're supposed to listen to the sermon. They're supposed to give their money. Come to the Christmas party. But no talk about maybe be a deacon someday. And deacon meant different things in different churches. And usually it was a popularity contest in most churches at first.
It seemed, and I think because of how this is shaping up, Bill, and again, some of this was happening after you left, but I'm trying to piece together the idea that you have the renewal, the lay ministry, lay evangelism, lay revival. And it was interesting in my state, in Kentucky, where I was, we had lay revival, lay evangelism. They did not want to do lay renewal. They just did not feel that was what they wanted to do. And, so when Bill Kaufman came, that changed. And then he allowed that to happen. But I'm wondering if the intention of the lay ministry, the lay event, all of that began to shift towards things like, and again, I'm jumping here, so you guys push back on me on this, but it began to lead to things like World Changers and Disaster Relief and National Fellowship of Baptists and Missions, and on and on and on. There was a breaking out that it was no longer confined to an organization. And I'm not anti-organization of Brotherhood, but I think it freed it up. It opened more doors, maybe.
Well, medical dental fellowship was there, and the nurses that got together. They had their own thing. That was kind of through WMU, but it was all kind of happening at the same time.
And I'm just curious. I mean, was this gathering momentum? You had mentioned the Sunday school board. Was WMU appreciating what was going on here? Because I know they had their roles and responsibilities, and we're not knocking that. It's just this had to have been so new that people maybe were just struggling to understand how it fit.
I got the feeling when I first got here, and I'll own this as my feeling. Someone else can, correct me or challenge it. But I got the feeling that WMU was just trying to kind of figure out what was going on. They were kind of deeply into program. They did great programming, and they were deeply into that, and they were just trying to. I think the nurses thing was a breakout for them. There was an interesting thing. They at one point asked me if I'd come down as photojournalist for them. And that was a big move for them. And I didn't feel it was a fit for me. And I don't remember the woman's name anymore. But, she was kind of a terror, around the Brotherhood.
Maybe it's good that you don't remember her name.
Yeah, around the Brotherhood Commission. I mean, I remember Norman talking about her. She was. You
should have been in on the World Changers negotiations. That was exciting.
I bet. Yeah.
For those who don't know who Bill Bangham is, I know there'll be most people who watch this will, but Bill is a very accomplished photographer.
Yes, he is.
And Bill, a little known fact about my career that you probably don't know is that when I graduated from Murray State University in Kentucky with a degree in journalism, my first job offer was to be a photographer at the Democrat Rocket in Festus, Missouri. And I didn't take it because I didn't want to be a photographer. I wanted to be a reporter.
Yeah.
I wanted to do photography, but I didn't want to be strictly a photographer. I love photography. And I remember you sitting in on one of your training sessions one time. I can't remember where it was, but somebody asked Bill, I know this is off the subject, but I think it's cool. Bill, what's the best camera? And I think Bill said, the best camera is the camera you have in your pocket or you have whatever you say.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true. And of course, this day of iPhones, that's more true.
I would love for you to tell, and you may have to condense it a little bit, but I'd love for you to tell your story about your interaction with Norman Godfrey. For me, now I know, by the way, if we can ever get you to do this on a separate podcast, I do want you to read your story about him. That's a beautiful story. But if you can kind of condense that down to the things he would ask you, and it was like, y'all have to hear this story, and then kind of knit it back together, because I think it's a beautiful story.
Norman and I had this interesting relationship, and I'll be honest with you, there were times I wasn't even sure I liked him.
Well, let me do this. Can you guys explain who Norman is? Because that way, in case there are some people that don't know.
You want to do that, Tim? Or?
That's what I was going to say. Why don't you tell us who Norman was? I came in 89.
Yeah, he was gone.
Died in 88, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Norman was the vice president of the Brotherhood Commission, and was really, when I look back on it, he was the soul of the commission. Jim Smith was the leader, and but in terms of, Jim would cast visions and whatnot, but in terms of the pragmatic, making it happen, Norman was the guy. And the story that Rob wants me to tell is, I was brand new, and I was sitting in my office one day, and Norman walks in, and he said, "Why do you do what you do?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, the writing and the photography. Why do you do it?" "Well, I like it." And he says, "I'm not asking you whether you liked it or not. I'm asking you why you do it." And I said, "Because it's important." And he says, "No, why is it important to you? Why do you do it?" And I came out with the standard expression that will often get Baptists to back off. I said, it's a calling.
Of course.
Yeah. And he said, well, good. He said, tell you what, he said, tomorrow night, the trustees are meeting, and why don't you have the opening devotion and talk to the trustees about this calling of yours? And he said, he says, some of these guys, got a bunch of pastors on this, and they don't think laymen should be in charge of anything. They're pretty sure that missionaries are called, and they think most pastors are. They're kind of, ambivalent about, directors of music, not sure about them at all, and they really don't think laymen should be in charge of anything or have a calling. So I'm sitting there and I go, he suckered me again. And I mean, there are a number of times in my years at the Brotherhood Commission that he sucked me into something that I didn't want to do, or at least I didn't think I wanted to do, that I thought had no value. But anyway, so great, so I'm sitting there at my desk and I grab my Bible and I think, okay, devotion, that means I got to have a verse. What am I going to use for a verse? And so I'd been reading Luke's Gospel at the time. So I flipped that open, and this is a rough paraphrase, but this is the way I remember. I remember reading the first couple of verses in Luke, and he says, "My dear lovers of God, inasmuch as others have attempted to set down a connected narrative of the things that have happened among us, I, in my turn, I'm trying to do so, and doing so too." And I went, that sounds an awful lot like a journalist, because that's our job. We create connected narratives to help people understand what's happening in their world. And, so I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. That's probably not. So not it. So I go flipping through, and I go all the way through Luke, and then I go over to Acts, and I'm flipping through that, and I'm not really seeing anything that would really connect for me in a devotional. And then I got to the last few verses of Acts, and it was almost as if Luke had set down his pen right in the middle of his story and didn't pick it up again. He didn't tie Acts together like writers do with, like Tim and I, do with our stories. We create a lead and then we tie it all together at the end, and he didn't do that. It was just left open. And I went, I think he had some idea that there would be others coming along behind him to continue telling the story. Mm. And I hope I'm one of those. And honestly, as more I thought about it, photographers, graphic designers, people who work in the arts, mold clay, paint, I think his idea went beyond just the writing. And matter of fact, in a little town called Sayednaya, northeast of Damascus, Syria, is a church, and in the church they have an icon that was. And this was the area that Paul fled to after his Damascus Road experience, and but they have an icon that is attributed to Luke, and I don't know. It's probably not, but I'd like to think it. I would like to think it was that he painted it. Yeah. But yeah, so there's one of many experiences of Norman, but that one was really. Yeah.
So Norman got you to thinking about this question more. Yeah. I mean, you apparently really struggled with it for a while, but you kind of came to personal conclusion on it, or at least part of it.
Did, and I realized afterwards, sometime afterwards, probably long after he was gone, dead, that what Norman was doing for me, he did this for me. He wanted me to do that devotional for me. It wasn't for the trustees.
Mm-hmm.
It was for me. And I realized that now.
See, Bill, you got this linked over. I mean, Tim, you can't make this stuff up, because when World Changers came into play, the whole issue wasn't that they were doing just projects to help people, but the projects they were doing were changing the World Changers kids themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I hear you saying, that Norman was trying to, the devotion wasn't for them, it was for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's, when I teach Sunday school, when you all do that, or you lead a devotional, or you tell, it has as much to do with your own personal reflections of things, and your own personal journey. And I find that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure that I convinced anybody on the trustees that night, but the good thing was nobody rose and challenged me.
Well, no, but you reinforced it for yourself. Yeah, and I commend that. For Norman's insight. Isn't that what we're trying to do with men in our church? Is to bring a maturity that, and sometimes I think, because I think this is fair, and again, you guys push back, but it's the attitude that, hey, if I don't get up and speak like Billy Graham and have thousands of people coming forward, have I really accomplished anything? And if it's changed me, maybe that's what the accomplishment was all about. Yeah.
Well, I remember a guy, and he was a member of the Brotherhood at Heritage, and his concept of ministry was to teach Sunday school, and he would badger the minister of education to let him teach a Sunday school, and he was incredible. He could kill a Sunday school class faster than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, if he started in September, no one would be in it by
wow.
But what he didn't see is this was a guy that always stepped in when other people were in need. I mean, he was always the one that kind of, he found this, someone who was sick and lonely and needed some help, needed some friendship, needed somebody to care for him, for them. And he was always doing that. And he saw no value. The guy took courses in the Bible from seminary in Washington, D.C. It didn't help him with his teaching at all. Not a bit, not a lick. But, his relationship with people and ferreting out and people trusting him with some of their deepest thoughts and their pain, and he was incredible, and he just never realized it.
The potential. Well, the simplicity, and I know, Tim, we're going to be wrapping this up here, but the simplicity of what Jesus said about the cup of cold water, which may not look like a huge thing, but I guess if you're thirsty, that's not a bad thing to have. And if you've got some and you want to share it, to make that work, or even give it to yourself, and I think what I appreciate, Bill, and again, maybe we can wrap this up a little bit, but the nuances in Brotherhood work that I have picked up by reading the journal. Bill, you got, of course, Tim knows, I've been digitizing everything I get my hands on because of this sizable collection. But what it's caused me to do is I've been reading. I stop and read this stuff. I'm digitizing, and I forget that I'm supposed to be, and then I lose the page number, and I forget and I have to start over. There's some good stuff in here.
Yeah,
there's some good stuff.
It's timeless. It's timeless material.
Yeah. And Tim and I have talked about that, how it just breaches over, and what people might have laughed at. We're saying, you laugh then, but really look what's happening when the laymen feel they're no longer empowered or attended to, and they feel back to where it was, where you're, sit in the pew, be quiet, don't say anything, and we'll call on you when you need you. And men are going, we're not going to do that. We'll find things to do, and they're finding things to do all over. I have to throw this in before I get you a chance to respond, and then I'll be quiet. Tim and I have been talking to some folks and just questioning about Brotherhood and what happened and why it happened. And I took your cue on the Brotherhood breakfast, what we used to call the meat, eat, burp, and go home club, and everybody laughed at that. But in my answer to that, I said, in essence, and I'll be quick about it, I said there was more fellowship going on there. There was prayer time. There might have been a guest speaker because I got to go a few times.
Mm-hmm.
There was this amazing where guys would cook eggs, but they were laughing and bantering, and they were becoming, and they were young people in. And then a few of them actually went out and did a couple things. We had some fix-it squads and other things that happened. Here's the interesting thing: 2024, the Brotherhood or the men's breakfasts are coming back because since COVID, there's been a missing of fellowship. Who would have thought of that, Bill? Who would have thought Brotherhood breakfasts are back? Now they don't maybe all call them that, but they're back. And I'm like, we have them in our church, Tim. I think maybe you guys have maybe done one or two, or going to. I think you guys have had some. There's a church in Illinois that's got a men's breakfast. They meet and then they talk about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. The very thing everybody laughed at is becoming once again active in the church. Thoughts on that, guys, and I'm gonna wrap it up. But thoughts about little things like that.
Well, I have a somewhat humorous anecdote. Baptists in Maryland are not the same as Baptists in Memphis. And very candidly, they're not. And I mean, we had women deacons. We were ordaining women, and not thinking anything about it, And I came down here to Memphis, my first, Brotherhood commission or Brotherhood breakfast in my church. I walked in and I'm going through the line and, they asked me what eggs I want and they asked me what grits I want. And I said, just one. And nobody laughed. Nobody laughed, And I thought, this is going to be interesting.
That's funny. Well, Tim, first of all, I want to say, Bill, thank you for your, and sometimes we've actually come back circle because there's probably more to your journey because I know you went from the commission to the two boards. You spent time there and your photography is well documented of the things that you took and your stories in that. And if I can ever get around to getting the World Missions Journal copied, which I plan to, you wrote an article following the death of Norman Godfrey. It was a beautiful article, and again, these are just poignant times where you stopped and just said, "Let me tell you about my friend," and that was very touching. So, anyway, Tim, anything on your side as we wrap this up?
Well, I'll just say that coming from a journalism background, I came from a daily newspaper to Brotherhood. I told Rob on the phone today, I said, I came into denominational work kicking and screaming. It sounds like you're the same way, Bill.
Yeah.
I was at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, actually, which, that's where I'm back in Little Rock, full circle. But anyway, not a newspaper. But, it was interesting, Bill, coming to the Brotherhood. All of a sudden, you're not just putting out a magazine. Of course, working for a daily newspaper, putting out a magazine was a breeze for me.
Yeah.
Because, the deadlines came less frequent, but still, you had a lot of assignments, a lot to do and everything. But, all of a sudden, you're a personality, too.
Yes.
You're a speaker, you're a person that, is asked to come speak in churches and things like that. And that was all new to me, but it was fun, wasn't it? It was a lot.
Yeah, it was. And it was sometimes kind of bizarre, because people read your stuff and then you run into them, say at the Southern Baptist Convention or something, and they're talking to you like they know you. Who is this guy?
Speaking of the Southern Baptist Convention, I remember we worked like dogs getting ready for the Southern Baptist Convention. And we went days ahead of time, built the displays usually, and manned the display. And I got involved helping Rob and others with the pages and wrote stories out of Baptist Press. I know you were a photographer for Baptist Press. And real quickly, before we get off of this, when you left the Brotherhood, where did you go? I was trying to remember.
I went to Atlanta to go with Missions USA magazine.
And then you ended up at the International Mission Board in Richmond, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Was the head of photography there. Yeah, I was trying to think of the timeline there. So,
Well, that was one of the things I did. I was also editor-in-chief of the Commission magazine.
okay, Commission. Yeah. So you basically were involved succinctly in the two magazines that you were familiar with before you came into
All
denominational.
three. I was editor of all three of the magazines.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is,
yeah. Unlike you, I came in. I was a decent writer. I mean, I had my writing chops, but I didn't know how to put out a magazine. I wasn't into photography, and all of a sudden I needed to be. 8 years at the Brotherhood Commission.
Yeah.
It set me up for what I did for the rest of my life. What I'm still doing today. I'm still doing it. I'm retired from a position, but I'm not retired from a calling.
Absolutely.
as we all are. Exactly. As we all are.
Yeah.
I felt the same way you felt when I went to Brotherhood. We worked like, how hard we worked, but I mean, it was fun. You felt like that you were there. God had a hand in you being there, and just the things that we got to do, like the travel you were talking about. I mean, when we went on story trips, it was, at least for me, it wasn't just for one story, it was for multiple stories.
Yeah.
I stayed out for 10 days one time in California doing stories all up and down the coast from Ventura all the way down to San Diego, so.
I literally have 3 file boxes full of photos from HMB, IMB or FMB, Brotherhood Commission. You guys took a ton of pictures. They're all not just yours, but just across the board. They're just picture after picture of things.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you missed out on, fortunately, in the 80s, the early 80s, the airlines had this thing that you could buy a really cheap ticket, and you could fly on that ticket for, sometimes it was 2 weeks and sometimes it was 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you couldn't come back home. You could not come back to Memphis. You had to be out that entire time. And I'd fly all around the country doing stories, And sometimes I would start out in Little Rock so that I could break it up by stopping in Memphis to spend a little bit of time at home.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Brotherhood, I worked obviously with Jim Burton. He was the Baptist men's editor, and I was the Baptist young men's editor. And it was, Jim was a photographer as well. He was a photojournalist and a good one. And I never will forget that I hadn't been there long. And he said, okay, we're going to go to California. And we're going to shoot we're going to take the video camera and we're going to shoot a story. I can't remember what it was about. But toting a video camera back in those days was different than today. And I mean, we carried all that. We checked all that stuff. And I remember toting all that stuff to the Memphis airport and then dropping at LAX and getting all that stuff off and getting a rental car and going all these places. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I was like, what have I got myself into? I thought I was going to be a writer and a photographer, and he's got us I was the grip, I was the grip for the.
You got it. And Tim, Bill can back me up on this. I remember when the Brotherhood Commission got so excited when they bought their set of IBM computers, the XTs. They were like $5,000 a piece, and they even gave you all an opportunity, Bill, to buy them. I don't know if you did, but apparently some of the guys.
I was only making $15,000 a year. I couldn't afford a $5,000 computer.
And what was hilarious was Gary Gardner, who was one of the staff members. He had us state guys huddle around this computer. And he goes, "Watch this," and he started doing things on the keyboard, and it was like magic. And he could delete and paragraph, and we're all going, wow. We're just sitting there like, wow. Because, we were all using typewriters where you had to use all that other stuff. But they were so proud of it. When the Brotherhood Commission closed, Bill, I got to give you this little piece. When they closed, Tim Sainer and a friend of mine and I, we did a video of the building. We just went through, and I walked with the video, and somewhere in my stuff is this video walk. We went down to the deepest part of the basement. He unlocked the door, and there were all those XT computers, all rusted, full of cobwebs. They were still down there. So I thought they never could get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, Tim and I, Tim Sander and I were the early advocates for the computers. I had gotten. Oh well, we had the 3 computers. And that's all we had, one on each floor of the building. You know, that was Norman's. Yeah, that was Norman's idea. You know, and Tim and I are gonna. You know, kind of the idea is for us each to have one. You know, and I'll never forget the day that he caught me writing a story on the computer outside Jim Smith's office. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm writing a story." He said, "No, that's not the way you use this." I said, "Norman, how do I use this?" Well, you write your story just the way you always did, and then you give your manuscript to your secretary, and she'll come up and she'll input that into the computer. You know? And we had a long conversation. I didn't get anywhere with it. I'll be real honest with you. But sometime later, it wasn't too long after that I bought one of these little, remember the Tandy 100s?
Oh, yeah.
I bought a Tandy 100. I could afford that. And and the first story trip I took it on, I wrote the story, you know, put the suction cups over the, you know, the payphone and filed it with Baptist Press and then a tagline at the bottom of it, I said, "Photographs available from Brotherhood Commission, you know, call blah blah blah," and ended up thinking, you know, like you said, Tim, going off on our, you know, multiple story trips. You know, I went on to do a couple of more stories. And then I finally came walking back into the Brotherhood Commission one morning. I'm walking up the front steps, and Norman comes out the front door. And he says, "We've gotten all these requests for your photographs from all over the place." He says, not just Baptist, but secular press too. He said, "How did you do it?" And I just grinned and I said, "Computers, Norman." And I stepped around him and I walked on into the building. He's following me and said, "Wait, what do you mean computers? What do you mean computers?"
This was so new to everybody. We were just like, we thought it was magic. I mean, it was magic.
Yeah. But I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, I walked into my office and Norman was on the floor putting together a computer table. And I went, "Norman, what you doing?" He said, "Well, it's a computer table for you." And I said, "What for?" And he said, "Well, you're getting your own computer." I said, "Wait, you got more important things to do. Let me finish that." And he's, nope, I'm going to do this." And I understood. I got it. You know, it was his way of saying, "I get it."
Yeah.
And thank you. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, Jim and I shared a computer. So
Yeah.
I actually ended up buying a PowerBook, Apple PowerBook for myself, and I used it a lot when I was at the Brotherhood. Rob, you got any closing words for us?
No, I just want to say, Bill, your journey, and I hope everybody, first of all, your journey is so appreciative, and I think both you and Tim, and maybe even me, represent that. You know, we have experienced a calling or direction that may be a little different and unique, but that's okay, because that's what everybody's unique calling is all about. And I think sharing that is important. And I would say to all of our listeners and people who are following this, you know, these are very important things that we're talking about. And we're going to have the resources that we've mentioned that I've shown on screen and what Tim is going to put on the screen to kind of show these things. And, you know, so I would hope that people would interact, I think. And now, in the past, we've put up a Brotherhood ribbon bar, and we want, there it is, perfect. Hey, what timing? Tim is the man. He knows how to do this. And so you can email us. We've got a blog, and then we have our archives. And by the way, Bill, we invite you to check out our archives. I'll try to get more stuff on there as I'm digitizing it and then transferring it over there. And I certainly will continue to do that. So anyway, but thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for being a part of this. And we look forward to our next one. And so, Tim, I give it back to you to close her up.
Well, the whole purpose of this, Bill, is for us to kind of provide an account for those that may not know much about what the Brotherhood Commission was, or the Baptist Layman's Movement of the South. And I don't know if you've watched any of our podcasts or not, but some may be boring to some. But in the future, these resources may be used by some seminary student or someone that's researching this subject. I think that what Rob says about the fact that, think of all the people that we worked with, all the great men and women of God that passed through the Brotherhood, either at the state level or at the national level at the commission there in Memphis. And, it was a real blessing to me. I know it was to you, Bill, to you, Rob, and to God be the glory for what he did through the Brotherhood, the ministry of the Brotherhood. I just wish that it was still around.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more I understand the dynamics of the importance of something like Brotherhood. And look at our world today, how men are vitally masculine men who are needed, who are godly men to to raise their families, to be good husbands, to be good leaders, and that sort of thing. So, well, any final word, Bill?
Well, just that it was good connecting with you again, Tim. We belong to a rather exclusive fraternity of former World Mission Journal editors. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Of course, I got to launch Journey, which was an experience, and it lasted for like 8 months. And then they killed it and threw me over to World Changers, which, hey, I'm glad I got to do that. But,
throw me in that briar patch, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And, of course, I have all the copies of the Journey, so those will be eventually digitized, too.
Okay,
so
good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to say so long, and so will Rob, and so will Bill. Thank you so much, Bill, for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Okay.